Okay, so I want to officially welcome everyone to our four-part learning series this fall of 2020. We are the Kikandaaswiwin Mookiisin program at Canadore College, the First Peoples Center. And as part of our four-part learning series program, we have four different speakers throughout this fall. We have Fran Davis, who is with us today. She's Haudenosaunee from the Six Nations of the Grand River. Our next speaker is Thayla Sarzan. She will be doing Indigenous medicines and ethnobotany. And then our third session is with Wilfred Buck, and he will be doing Cree constellations. And our last one is in December, and that is the teachings of the birch bark canoe with Pinook Smith. So I'll welcome you all to our learning series. We're really excited to have you all. And I want to officially welcome our guest speaker today. Her name is Fran Davis, and I'm going to just bring up her her bio here. Okay, so Kelly is Haudenosaunee of the Grand River Territory. Kelly will share the philosophy of the good minds as the foundational teachings of our relationships with our natural environment. The wampum belts are original agreements to resolve conflict. Kelly will share a few teachings about the origins of treaties prior to colonization and the first treaty made with the Dutch settlers. She will also talk about the treaty made between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. The corn, beans, and squash teachings reflect the diversity, uniqueness, and humbleness that are needed to foster healthy relationships. Kelly will culminate this session with her rendition of the Three Sisters story. So bringing all these teachings from the shores of Lake Erie, Kelly also provides second-year teacher education candidates at Wilfrid Laurier University an Indigenous context and education course, speaking engagements in Indigenous contexts in a variety of sectors across the country, and professional development opportunities with various levels of government employees. So I want to officially welcome you, Kelly. So you can, I'll leave it up to you. You can go ahead and do what you have planned for us today.
Okay, thank you. So in my language, I'm just going to share a small prayer, and it will lead into our first topic that we have. And I have a little PowerPoint or presentation to share on the screen. So I'm going to start out with speaking two of our 6 languages that we have at Six Nations. The first one is my Kiuga language, and the second one is my Mohawk language. And the reason why I acknowledge 2 nations is my mother, we're a matrilineal society and we follow our mother's line. My mother is Kiuga on her mother's side, but her father was Mohawk, so my grandfather was Mohawk. So I acknowledge both nations on my mother's side. So in my languages, I want to share with you a small prayer. Nyawagoa sungwa indiso sungwa wiganyo hanyo. Ne te atenu raro, ne ongwe soa, etunu yuduhage, ne ngwat ne gura. So in my languages, I said, thank you very much, Creator, for giving us things to be thankful for. And I also just acknowledge people, all the people in our lives, the people here in this circle, the people that influence our lives in good ways and bad ways. And the reason why we acknowledge those people that, may challenge our lives sometimes and cause hardships in our lives sometimes is that I was taught that we have to acknowledge them because they are some of our greatest teachers. They teach us how not to be. They teach us, the consequences of not being a good person, or, we have a lot to learn from those experiences. So I just wanted to acknowledge people that are in our lives. And then I said, now our minds are one. And that's going to go right into our the presentation that I just put together today for you. And it's going to start with the good mind that we call it. That's the philosophy of the Haudenosaunee people. And sorry, just let me fix this. So The good mind, when we talk about the good mind, we talk about our connection to our natural environment. It's a spiritual connection, they say. For some people, you know, they wake up every morning and they start to give their thanks for everything in creation. And they'll start with the people first, people in their lives. And the reason why we're taught to start with people first is because that's our first family. The human beings, right? People are our family. They say there's 4 families of the earth. There's the animal kingdom, the plant life, the mineral life, and us pitiful human beings. And the reason why I say pitiful human beings is I was taught that that's what keeps us humble, is to know that, you know, we rely on all those other 3 families in order to survive. And those other 3 families don't need us to survive. So that's why we're taught that we're pitiful. We're pitiful in the sense that we are the weakest link amongst creation. So we're taught to start with the people, and then we're taught to acknowledge and give our thanks and appreciation to Mother Earth, and to everything on the ground, below the ground, and above the ground, including the unseen. So different speakers will talk about the Thanksgiving address. And when they start with the people and they say, you know, they might say, oh, we're so thankful that we have people in our lives to support us, to entertain us, to love us, to, you know, walk with us, to help us build things, or whatever they want to say about people, and whatever the speaker wants to say. And then at the end of him acknowledging, and I say he, and I'll get to that after, but with him acknowledging whatever it is that, you know, he's thankful for of people, and he says, now our minds are one. And that's the objective of this prayer, or this speech, some people call it a Thanksgiving address. In my language, we call it the Ganyohanyo, which means the words that come before all else. And I'll talk about that after as well. So then he'll go on and he might talk about the waters. When he talks about the waters, he might acknowledge and give thanks that the waters quench our thirst, that we can use the waters to bathe. We can use the waters for transportation or entertainment. You know, we can go canoeing or swimming, or, you know, we can use the waterways to move our foods, move us, you know, transportation wise. And he may talk about how the waters provide life for everything in creation, you know. And then at the end of that, he said, now our minds are one. So then he might go on and talk about the plants and how the plants provide us food and provide us medicines, and, you know, they contribute to the oxygen, you know, like, I know it's the trees that do that, the big part, but the plants do too. The plants also clean the air for us, right? And so and then he'll go on to say whatever else he wants to acknowledge about the plants. And then he says, now our minds are one. Then he'll go into maybe talking about the sun. And he'll talk about how the sun provides us heat and light and vitamin D, which I call the happy vitamin. Talk about how the sun gives us nourishment, how the sun lets us know the time of day. You know, the sun provides warmth. We have an elder from our Haudenosaunee communities. His name's Tom Porter, and he talked about how the sun comes up in the morning, and it's like Creator's fingers, those sun rays. They go across everything. They touch everything in creation. And he says that that's just like, you know, Creator wrapping everybody in a nice warm hug to start the day, you know. And so he talks about that and talks about different things. The speaker will talk about different things the sun does for us and our natural environment. And then he'll say, now our minds are one. Then he'll go on and he'll talk about, you know, the animals and how the animals will give their lives for our sustenance. They will know, their lives for us, use their skins to keep us warm, to make clothing or shoes, whatnot from there. Use their bones maybe to make tools, and to use every part of them to, make sinew, even to help, sew together our clothing items or our moccasins and things like that. He'll talk about sometimes how we use animals as companionship, right? As pets. Sometimes we use the animals to provide guidance, right? We watch and see how the mothers treat their young ones and how they contribute to community and family, to the pack, and how they work together. And so at the end of him acknowledging whatever it is he wants to about the animals, then he says, now our minds are one. Then he might move into talking about the stars and the moon and the night sky. And he'll acknowledge and give thanks for, the light that we get at night, the constellations that provide us navigation, how the moon provides us, provides us a time to know when our babies are coming, or how the moon's energy moves the tides in the ocean, and how important we acknowledge all of that, everything in the sky. And he'll just mention different things that the night sky does for us. And then he'll say, now our minds are one. He might go on to talk about the fish in the water and how the fish clean the water for us and how the fish provide food for us, and he'll acknowledge different things about the fish. And then at the end of his acknowledgement, he'll say, now our minds are one. So I'm hoping that everybody's starting to catch on to that now our minds are one phrase, I'm going to explain that a little more. But anyways, he'll continue to go through everything in creation. And at the end of it, the last will be, which we say, Sangwayang Diso, that means our creator. And so he'll go through and talk about creator and why he's so thankful for creator and everything that creator does for us. And then he'll say, now our minds are one again. After every time he acknowledges something creation, he says, now our minds are one. And that's the objective of this Ganyo Hanyo, the Thanksgiving address, some people call it. The Ganyo Hanyo means the words that come before all else. So the objective of that is the philosophy of the good mind. They say every time that speaker says, now our minds are one, we're taught to put all of our troubles aside, to put all our worries aside, put all our responsibilities aside in our minds, and just be thankful, right? Just bring our minds to that gratitude, because they say every time he goes through something in that speech or that address, that our minds should be lifted higher. They said that's what that, now our minds are one, saying, okay, lift your mind higher. And the objective is by the time he's done doing that Thanksgiving address, is that everybody's minds will be like at a divine place, be at the most thankful place, because they say that's our most powerful mind, is gratitude and love and appreciation. So as Haudenosaunee people, this is our philosophy. This is the way we're to start our day. This is the way we're to start meetings that we make decisions at. We use this as well when we start our ceremonies. Before we start our ceremonies, at the end of our ceremonies, we do another similar type of speech or prayer, some people call it. Even at celebrations, you have a social or you have a birthday party or something. They say that these words come before all else, because we want to have everybody in that good mind. We want everybody to be thankful and appreciative and happy, and because they say when we're there, good things happen, right? So when we're very thankful, And we're of our good mind, good things will happen. You know, we'll put our minds together. That's what they say now, our minds are one. We'll put all our minds together just with gratitude. So that's the philosophy of our good mind, what we call the Gunyo or the Thanksgiving address. And again, it's our spiritual connection to our natural environment. So let's see if I know how to work this. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to talk about our wampum belts a bit. Let's see. So I'm going to start with this first wampum belt. Well, that one is just a picture, but I'm going to shut this off because I'm going to hold up a wampum belt here. Now this wampum belt here, it's called the dish with one spoon. And this wampum belt is about our natural environment and all of the resources available to us in this dish with one spoon. That's what this represents. And this this wampum belt was created at the same time as our Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and I'm going to show you that in a minute, the belt for that. But this wampum belt was created because what it says is that we have this dish with one spoon, and we're all to share that dish and that spoon. And just like if you're at home and there was only one dish and one spoon in your house, and it was your turn to use it, first of all, you want it clean. You don't want to use a dirty bowl or a dirty spoon, right? So it's going to be clean and ready for you. And then when you use it, when you're done using it, your responsibility is to make sure it's clean and ready for the next person to use it, right? So, and the other thing that this represents is, say in your house you had one pot of soup, and it was for everybody, right? So you would not go and just eat all that soup, or you would not destroy the rest of that soup after you got yours, right? So if you think of it in that way, you think about this treaty saying the same thing, but with our natural environment in all of creation. So we're taught that this land that we live on is not ours, you know? We're borrowing it from our children, because our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, they're the ones that will be benefiting as well, as long as we stick to this agreement to take care of our natural environment and not to become greedy and try to take everything. You know, they say you only take what you need, and you make sure that there's some left for other people or maybe other beings. You know, the animals or whatnot, they need some of those resources too, right? And so this wampum belt, that's what this signifies, is that we have a responsibility that we do not destroy the land, because we have other faces coming. We have other generations coming that also need to have a thriving environment to live from and to grow from and to thrive from, right? So, so that's what this belt represents, and it's called the dish with one spoon. So around the same time, I don't know which one was created first, that dish with one spoon or our Hiawatha belt, it's called. I'll show you it. So this belt, I'm going to tell you, on this side over here, this represents our Seneca Nation. The one next to it represents my nation, Kyoga Nation. And the one in the middle represents the tree there. It represents the Onondaga Nation, because they're our record keepers. And then the next one represents the Oneida people. And this last one over here represents the Mohawk people. And so originally, this was our original confederacy, and it was called the League of Five Nations. We call this the Hiawatha Belt. But the Confederacy was the League of Five Nations, and we were we mostly stayed within the upper state New York. We were neighbors, all 5 of these nations. And these belts, they say, like documented, they say that these two, this dish with one spoon and that Hiawatha belt, was created around 1142. So 1142 was approximately 1,000 years ago, right? But our people, the Haudenosaunee people, say, no, our confederacy came together long before that. For thousands of years, our people have come together. But it's also suggested that maybe our confederacy came together and our nations came together that way because we knew colonization was coming. Our ancestors had predicted what was coming, and they knew that we needed to be support each other and help each other, rely on each other. So this confederacy was brought together maybe 1142, maybe before that, but it's documented 1142. So anyways, this Hiawatha belt and this confederacy adopted the Tuscarora people in the 1700s. And the reason why we adopted the Tuscarora people was because they were, chased out of their homelands where they originally lived down south in the United States. And they came up as refuge to our territories where we lived in our longhouses, and we adopted them. And that's how we became the Six Nations. And that was in the 1700s. I'm going to move on to another belt here. And this belt may look a little more familiar to some people, as people have started to acknowledge it across the country for some time since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015. But this is what we call the two-row wampum belt. And this belt goes on and on and on. And all of these belts, I'll tell you the significance of these strings hanging. The reason why they have these strings hanging is because they say these agreements will never end. They go on forever. These are agreements that, our people have made with different nations. We have many wampum belts. We have agreements with a lot of nations. And this was the first agreement with settler people. And the first settler people that our people made this agreement with was the Dutch. And this was from the early 1600s, 1612, that this agreement was made. So about 1992, we started getting settlers on the shores of Turtle Island. And then in 1493, they brought what they call the Doctrine of Discovery. And that's what they used to justify to take our lands. And they still use that today. But I won't get into that too much. We'll be here all night. But anyhow, so 1493 till about 1613, this wampum belt had to be created. And what it is, it's an agreement. It's they're usually used to settle conflicts, right? To bring people together to understand, just like the dish with one spoon. People were being greedy. There was things not going good in nature. That's why we had to have these agreements made up, because we needed to find our common ground. We needed to agree to how to coexist, right? So we had to get this agreement made with the Dutch people because they weren't being very nice guests. They were brought in their Doctrine of Discovery, and they wanted to destroy our people and take our lands over and whatnot. So we had to make an agreement with them. And the agreement is that these purple rows represent the vessels. So one is a Dutch ship, and the other one is the Haudenosaunee canoe. And in that Dutch ship is everything that makes them unique as Dutch people. Their songs, their dances, their languages, their ceremonies, their foods, you know, their clothing, everything that makes them unique as Dutch people. And then in this Haudenosaunee canoe is all of our things that make us unique as Haudenosaunee. So our foods and our clothing and our songs, our dances, you know, our clothing, our languages, everything that makes us unique. And these white rows represent what it means to foster a healthy relationship. So things like friendship and love and respect, right? Those are what are supposed to surround each of our vessels as we travel this river of life, you know, side by side. And you'll notice all through this belt, they never cross, they never intersect, because we're taught we're not supposed to jump in each other's canoe or each other's ship. We're not to try to dominate each other's ways. We're not to try to change each other's ways. We're supposed to respect each other, respect our differences, and respect our similarities as well, right? So this Tura Wampum is about a nation-to-nation relationship. And this wampum belt is still valid, although the Dutch are not the rulers, I guess you would say, of this country right now. Now they're called Canadians, right? And that is, this agreement is still valid because the Haudenosaunee people have not changed our way. You know, we didn't change and say, oh, no, that doesn't apply anymore, because we know that these agreements, they go on forever, you know, and because they were made to say, how do we coexist? How do we coexist on this land, right? So it's always about our land. So that is the Tura Wampum belt. And then I have one more belt I'm going to share with you today. And this belt is local, you know, to any territories that have Haudenosaunee people and Anishinaabe people close by, in proximity to wherever we're doing our land acknowledgements or whatnot. And this belt, I could show you, let's see. So there's half of it, and the other half looks the same, right? So these two symbols on the end, these boxes on each end, one represents the Haudenosaunee people and one box represents the Anishinaabe people. And this line, this white line down the middle that connects the two, this is what they call the pathway to peace. And this is another agreement that we made with our relatives, because we knew that we have to support each other. You know, we're different, we have different ways of doing things, but we still need to support each other as Indigenous people of this land, right? Because of colonization and because of all these things that are happening. And so this agreement was made to say we have to always maintain that pathway of peace between our Haudenosaunee relatives and our Anishinaabe relatives, you know, to make sure that we support each other and that we can understand each other, that we can work things out, whatever the issues may come up. We have a pathway of peace that we can walk. And it's a long agreement. So it's a really long pathway. And they say, like, each one of these beads has a teaching. They have a teaching in there for us of how we maintain this support in this relationship. So in those teachings, they'll talk about, you know, how we remember at a time when we did get along, there was no disagreements, you know, stuff like that. And then we even, in those teachings as well, they'll talk about, okay, we've had disagreements before and this is how we worked it out, right? There's always that back and forth. There's always really good times where everything goes smooth. And then there's those challenging times. So what I was taught is we have those challenging times so that we can grow and we can learn, right? So in that pathway to peace, they say, you know, if you're having a hard time to find a resolution or an offer of a resolution or suggestions of how to, support each other and maintain that peace, they say walk that road. You can walk that path, and you can count your blessings, and you can count your challenges, and you can remember all those things. And by the time you reach the other nation, you should have a solution, right? So there's always hope for that, right? So you'll see in our wampum belts, it's always about relationships, right? It's about how do we coexist? How do we work together? How do we support each other? And share my screen again. And see what the next thing we're talking about. So we're going to talk about the three sisters. So the three sisters are about support, right? You see up there, the tall one is the corn sister. And then we have the smaller one, which is the bean sister. And we have the other one, which is the squash sister. And you'll notice they're all holding hands, right? They're all supporting each other. They're all very different in their appearance and what they produce and the ways that they grow, even how long they grow. But you know what? They're still connected, right? So that's why we have these three sisters. So the corn, you plant the corn, and they say that you let that corn grow for a bit until it gets so high, and then you plant the beans, the bean poles next to it. And then after about a week or so after you do that, then you plant the squash. And the reason why these three are planted together is because they provide that support for each other. The corn grows nice and tall. The beans, they grow around the corn and they support, or the beans, yeah, the corn supports the beans growing as they wrap around the stalk. And the squash protects all the roots. Like the squash, you get really big leaves, right? And they protect the roots because sometimes it might not rain for a while and you need that moisture still. The roots still need that moisture. So those bean leaves, they protect all of that. But you see how they work together and they support each other very differently. And they're very different. They're very different tastes and they're very different textures. And they're very different in their growth and the time that they grow, but they're supporting each other. And this is the importance of our three sisters gardens, is that, it's kind of a low maintenance. These three sisters gardens are low maintenance because of the way they support each other. And so anyways, this is what I was talking about, is relationships. Again, going back to that relationship like we were talking about in the wampum belts, right? It says here, companion planting the old-fashioned way with the three sisters garden. The corn supports the beans add nutrients. Oh, I forgot that part. Nitrogen, and the squash shades out the weeds. And they also provide that moisture. But they say you plant the corn after danger of the frost has passed. And then you plant the pole beans when the corn is about, 5 inches high. And then you plant the squash seeds 1 week later. So they start out as the seeds, right? And so in this relationship of the three sisters, it's important again to remember that, they're not the same. They all have so much differences, but they're like a team, right? It's like a sports team for anybody that plays sports. You have your offense, you have your defense, you have your coaches, you have your goalies, right? You have your fans, all those people together is what makes a team, right? Even their fans, even the fans that are supporting them and cheering them on. It's a big, important part of a team. So that's what this Three Sisters Garden is about. It's about relationships and working together and being a team and being strong and not trying to take over. Like the corn's not going to try to be like the squash, you know? And the squash is certainly not going to try to be like the corn or the beans. You know, they're going to stay unique and they're going to enjoy each other's company and each other's support and the benefits they get from each of them. So, so a little story about the three sisters I was told as a little girl, and it was probably because I had sisters. And it was told that these sisters, there were sisters, and they all wanted everything fair. They wanted to make sure that, you know, everybody got everything equally and everything was done at the same time for each of them. And it was so bad. They wanted to have their hair brushed at the same time. They wanted to eat at the same time. They wanted to do everything at the same time. So what had happened is their grandmother told them the story of the three sisters, this corn, beans, and squash. And so that's how these three sisters start to build a different type of relationship, because their relationship was of competition. They wanted to compete. They wanted to be better. They wanted to, you know, they wanted to do things to outdo each other. But when their grandmother taught them this story about sisters' garden and how they support each other and how they're very different, and they each have their own unique qualities that contribute to helping each other, then the grandmother was, or the girls were accepting that they didn't have to do everything the same. They didn't have to get the same things all the time, because maybe one sister needed new socks and the other sister didn't, you know, or maybe one sister needed a haircut and the other ones didn't. But before that, they wanted everything done the same. They wanted everything fair. Well, it's not fair. So-and-so got this and I didn't get that. So that was the story that the grandmother used to help these sisters. So that's my story about the three sisters. And I think we're going into some reflection or thoughts that anybody has or questions that anybody has. I'll take my screen off now. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, that was wonderful, Kelly. Yeah, we'll leave the floor open. So for anyone who wants to ask questions, I'm going to stop recording now.